The Linux Action Show is created by Jupiter Broadcasting. It's sponsored by Ting. Go to last.ting.com to save off your first device or plan, and DigitalOcean. Go over to DigitalOcean.com and use our promo code LASTDigital, and then you can spin up your own Linux rig for free. Welcome to the Linux Action Show, episode 356. My name is Chris.
And my name is Noah.
Hey, Noah. Good morning. Now, we have a big show. I'm really excited. Noah's going to take us into the ham shack today. Noah, how long have you been a ham?
Well, I just renewed my license, so I guess a little over 10 years.
Okay. So Noah's going to go into ham radio. Some call it the OG open source. I don't know about that, but what I do know is it's a fascinating world, and it's one that goes hand in hand with Linux and open source. So we'll learn a little bit about ham radio, and then we're going to learn about how it works under Linux. It's something I've wanted to do since the beginning of this show, so I'm really excited to dive into this topic. And then in the news, holy crap. Speaking of something we've been watching a long time, there's now over 1,000 games under Steam for Linux. We're going to go into some of the milestones there. Google's calling it quits on one of their major open source initiatives. We'll tell you about that. And is the Linux Foundation trying to rein in Linus Torvalds? And then is Father Time about to call it quits? And it could impact one of the most important open source projects that we depend on. So we'll talk about what's going on there and maybe the projects that could be replacing it, even if it never gets its funding. And then we also have our feedback. So it's a big show, and on top of all of that, Noah, we've got our picks, and I believe this one this week was sent in by an audience member, Runs Linux, correct, sir?
It was, and he wants to say hi to his mom.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was very specific about that. He's like, here's the Run Linux, and it's amazing. And by the way, hi, Mom. So I said I'd pass it along.
So Romeo says hi to his mom, and he tells us that the Army Cyber Warfare Unit runs Linux. We got here is a picture of a still from a video we're about to show you. And if you look closely right there, Noah, I don't know about you, but does that look like maybe GNOME 3 with classic mode turned on?
Yep. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking GNOME.
All right, let's see it in action. So here we go. We got the YouTube from the USA Army recruiting channel.
Is pivotal, as it will be an essential element of all future operations.
Watch closely.
And for the commander capable of seeing the network as a weapons platform, the soldiers in this MOS will play a critical role, enhancing and safeguarding cybersecurity for mission-critical assets.
Those are definitely
Military
Linux rigs.
occupational specialty, cryptologic network warfare specialist.
Wow. That's a lot of mumbo-jumbo, but that was definitely Linux I was seeing there. Now, that's cool. That's pretty cool, Noah, but do you want to know how they used to do it back in the 80s? How about the late 80s? This is how the Army used to simulate their warfare. This is the gear they used.
The Army is playing its own video games these days with a massive real-time simulation of Star Wars, or SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative. The Army's war game involves a Cray XMP supercomputer connected to 8 mini supercomputers connected to 30 mainframes. The Army says the experiment will enable them to synchronize all Earth and space-based SDI assets within 4 microseconds.
Oh, yeah, the SDI initiative, right, Star Wars. So there you go, 30 mainframes when they used to play war games before. And now they're doing it on...
They ran on tapes?
Yeah, totally. Or punch cards, maybe, even.
Yeah.
And now they're doing it with Linux laptops. So that's the change. That's how the technology has changed. We go from 30 mainframes to some Linux laptops. Pretty cool.
With SSDs, probably.
I mean, really, and if you're going to launch cyber warfare and unquestionably stoke the next generation of cyber wars and be the instigator of all-out worldwide cyber warfare, you want to do it under Linux, right?
Absolutely. And you're going to want SC Linux, so you're going to be using some sort of a Red Hat distribution.
I actually would be not surprised at all. I mean, so isn't the latest Red Hat Enterprise Linux shipping with GNOME with the classic extensions pre-turned on?
Yeah.
So that probably was Red Hat Enterprise.
I actually, just for a brief time, I tried to use Red Hat as a desktop distribution just to see if it could be done.
Yeah.
And it was a total nightmare, and I would never, ever, ever recommend doing that, but I tried.
You know, when we were at Ohio Linux Fest, I got the inside scoop on how the Red Hat guys do that. So because I was asking him, I'm like, so seriously, like, this is your full-time desktop? You're not lying to me? He's like, yeah, Red Hat Enterprise Linux is my full-time desktop. I'm like, okay, but seriously, how hard is that? He's like, yeah, I'm not going to lie. It does take a little extra work. I do it because I need the experience for my work. He says, but I'll tell you what's becoming a game changer. And this, I think you probably know what I'm talking about, the guy at Ohio Linux Fest at Red Hat, right? So I was talking about this, and he says, it's not just me, but a lot of the people on the team internally that are using this on their machines are now using Docker to do a lot of the applications that are just a huge pain in the butt. So now they're using Red Hat Enterprise Linux as the base desktop and Docker to install some of the stuff or even build certain development environments that are sort of outside Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And that's, he says, making the big difference for them.
And that's what always makes Red Hat a standout a company to me, and kind of why I probably border on fanboyism, is that when you meet their employees, all of them are running Linux. Granted, I will give you that I've seen more of them running Fedora on the desktop than Red Hat. But the bottom line is they eat their own dog food. They issue laptops with Linux, and then they can wipe away Red Hat and put on Fedora if they'd rather have it, depending on what you do. But there are a couple of them that run Red Hat as their desktop distribution, and I think they're nuts. But I suppose you can get it to work. The straw that broke the camel's back for me was I couldn't even reliably get GNOME 3 to stay with the activities, like the actual GNOME 3. I didn't want it in the fallback mode. And there was some guides to do it, and I got it to work, but then when I went to update it, went back, and then I just threw in the towel and said, forget it.
Yeah.
Because things like VLC take like 40 minutes to get that to work, because nothing is designed around that. And why should it be? It's not really what it's meant for.
And the flip side is, in the news segment, we're going to talk a little bit about Fedora 22 and some of the stuff they're doing on the desktop side there. So, and that's sort of the other side of that coin, isn't it? So stay tuned. We'll have a little discussion on that. But first, I want to mention our friends over at DigitalOcean. Go over to DigitalOcean.com and use our promo code LASTDigital to get a $10 credit. LAS Digital, all one word, lowercase. That supports the show, but it also gives you a $10 credit that you get to apply to your account, and you can try out their rigs for a little while. Now, what is DigitalOcean? It is awesome. It's my data center these days. It's simple cloud hosting dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. That doesn't mean you have to be a dummy or you have to be an IT administrator to know how to do it. It means it's built so that anybody can get it done. If you're an IT pro, you love how streamlined and efficient it is. If you're new to doing this kind of thing, you appreciate how easy and intuitive it is to get started and how quick you can do it. You'll get started in less than 55 seconds. And pricing plans start at only $5 a month. That'll get you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and London. Yeah, what's up? Go check it out on Instagram. It's gorgeous. Their interface is simple and intuitive. And the control panel, it's like, honestly, I talk a lot about UI. And it's one of these that I cannot understate. I can't overstate. I mean, when I started working in virtualization, my first experience to virtualization was controlled from a 386 connected to a System 390 IBM mainframe. And the experience of watching how you would manage that, and then later I translated to IBM's other virtualization platforms, eventually VMware, and then Zen, and VirtualBox, obviously, a bunch of other virtualization platforms. Proxmox is one that I've used a lot. I have never experienced in any of my years using any of those systems an interface that is as well designed as DigitalOcean's interface to manage this, or as fast and powerful. And the best part is even though it's crazy easy, crazy intuitive, and that's all you'd ever need, they also have a straightforward API that the user community extends on a fantastic basis. So even if you don't want to use the API yourself, you don't ever have to write a line of code or a line of script. You just go take advantage of the community apps, and they rock. It's so handy to like just go check on my Droplet, on my own cloud Droplet from my Android device when I'm on the go. I love it. It's just a nice peace of mind too. Go over there and try out their one-click installations as well. You can get started on things like Ghost or GitLab or WordPress with one-click installation. And DigitalOcean's been all in on Docker since day one. They truly get the fundamental key technologies like Docker, KVM, SSDs for the storage, and now CoreOS and FreeBSD. So if you use our promo code LASTDigital, you'll get that $10 credit. You go try out that $5 rig for 2 months for absolutely free. Go set up your own cloud instance and see what it's like to take your data into your own hands. Go set up SyncThing and have your own offsite cloud storage. Go use GitLab and sync your configuration files to your own server that you have root access to. DigitalOcean.com and use the promo code LASTDigital. Also, speaking of Docker, don't forget about their amazing tutorials. They have a great introduction to the common components of Docker. If you're struggling to understand Docker, but it's something you think you need to know, this is it. This is what I'm talking about. DigitalOcean they totally get this stuff, and they just are featuring a great write-up right now with great visual overviews, all of it. Check it out, DigitalOcean.com, promo code LASTDigital, and a huge, huge thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Linux Action Show. I love it, Noah. I love it.
Yeah, and apparently a lot of other people love it too. Last week or the week before, I think it was last week, that I offered to give some of those $15 coupons away. They're all gone now, but I got loaded with interesting stories of all the interesting things that people are doing with Linux. And it's funny because every time I think I have a pretty good idea of what Linux is capable of, somebody surprises me and they're like, guess what I did? And I'm like, really? That's possible? You can do that? I didn't even know you could do that.
Some of my favorite stories are like emails from dads that are like, well, I set this up for my family. Now we have OwnCloud on there for my wife and kids, and we have a Minecraft server on there, and we have a Mumble server on there, and they have a family Mumble server, and they're doing it for $5 a month. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so our desktop app pick today looks like one of these tools that I wish I would have known about way long time ago. Noah, you pointed me to this, and it looks super great. It is Shell in a Box. What is it, sir?
Well, so I was at Green Mill, sitting at Green Mill, and I opened up my laptop, and they have free Wi-Fi. So I connected the free Wi-Fi, and of course they have the little captive portal. So I go and accept the terms, sign my life away, and agree to be on the human centipede, all that stuff. And then I open up my terminal, and as you can imagine, I live a lot of my life inside of a terminal. I get a lot of my work done in the terminal, and can't talk to my server. So first I kind of freaking out. I'm like, did something go wrong? And if something went wrong, why didn't my alert system, send an alert to my phone? So go on my phone and I check, no, I can get into the server just fine. So why can't I do it? Well, turns out Green Mill blocks everything except port 80. So I had no way to I couldn't SSH into anything.
I hear about this on the TechSnap show all the time.
Yeah, so what I started looking for a solution. I found the Shell in the Box. It took me, and again, DigitalOcean, $5, spun it up, took 5 minutes. And I'd say within 10 minutes, I could go to the public IP of my DigitalOcean droplet, because at that point, I don't have DNS set up, and I get a web page with a blinking cursor, and I can SSH into anything I want.
So
it's amazing.
It just loads. The whole web page is a shell.
Is a shell, and so you authenticate.
What user is it running as?
Well, so you log in it prompts you as if you just sat down at the console of a box. So you'd log in with whatever user you created on your droplet, and then once you're logged into that machine, obviously you can SSH into other machines.
So it seems like this could obviously be abused if you were not very careful with how it's set up, but easily on a LAN.
To that point, so DigitalOcean, the nice thing about DigitalOcean is I can power down the machine from the web console, right? I can log into my DigitalOcean dashboard. I click on the droplet, I can power it off, and it's not running unless I need it. If I need it, I log into my DigitalOcean dashboard, I turn it back on.
Get the Android app.
Yeah, well, the Swimmer.
Swimmer's
app, right?
a good one.
Yeah, I have it. I don't really use it. As you're well aware, I'm not a big fan of tablets, so I try and get everything done from my laptop.
Yeah.
But the plus, it looks so nice when you go, and, that little dashboard. And I can
this is not an ad, by the way. This is honestly not an ad. This is really just what he does. This is why Noah needs like 50 droplets.
Did I tell you they raised my limit?
Yes.
They raised my limit from 25. It was great. So I'm no longer limited to 25 droplets. It's amazing. But yeah, I can. But this is why you get stuff like this for $5. I have shell access, so I generated my SSH keys and propagated those out, and now I can log into any of my computers.
Well, what I like about this is this would be perfect on my home server. Right, I mean, because this would work. Then I would assume because it's not using it's not Java, right? I mean, would it work on a mobile device? It would, right?
I assume so. I don't know.
I'll look.
Can try it and find out.
It's JavaScript. Yeah, so it would work. Yeah, so you could load this up on. So this would be a perfect tool to have on your home file server or something like that. And then from your tablet on your couch, you could just bring it up in your web browser and get shell access. I mean, you could also just get an SSH client, but it's neat. It is nice. You don't have to have any additional software.
Well, you can get an SSH client until you don't have access to anything but port 80, and then you can't get an SSH client, which is where I was at.
And for me, if I was going to use something like this, I wouldn't even bother with trying to figure out how to secure it. I would just not have it on unless it was easy to, Like I would just do what you're doing is turn the drop, in your case, turning the droplet on for a few minutes and then turning it off. That's a pretty good way to make sure people aren't going to get into it when you're not using it.
I mean, I know that security through obscurity is no security at all, but the reality is you can change, you could, I mean, it kind of eliminates the purpose then, but you could change the port, the web port of which it connects to. And then in addition to that, it is SSL. It has a self-signed certificate, but, so it's not like they didn't put any thought into security, but you are essentially handing a keyboard to the console of a box to everyone. But you know what? Here's the other thing too. Worst case scenario, if I have propagated SSH keys, but let's say you hadn't done that. Worst case scenario, they get into your DigitalOcean droplet, they do bad things, and then DigitalOcean tells you, hey, bad things are happening, and then you turn it on.
Well, and I think it maybe on a VPS is less of a scenario as a real more use case scenarios on a LAN. Like, so I was just thinking of that Ubuntu Orange box. Like, you could put this on those NUCs, or I was, again, I'm thinking of like our VMs here that we have here at the studio that we could throw them on there. So I think a shell in a box has a lot of uses, not just on something to be facing for the public, but if you know how to handle the risks and you can mitigate those, it could be useful for that too.
Yeah.
All right. So shell in a box, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes. All right. So I want to talk about something that we were actually the first to know about. The Numix project was on the show a long time ago and teased a release of a new distribution, a collaboration of two projects that came together to make something real fancy. And we were quite intrigued when they announced it. So Ozone OS has been announced. The Hydrogen beta just released, and it definitely is beta, so keep that in mind. It's a Linux distribution based on Fedora, created by a collaboration between the Numix project and the Neutrix SA project, designed not to get in the way, but to be really simple and modern-looking, and really make Fedora approachable to the average person who probably wants to sit down, watch a few Flash videos, or, videos or play MP3s and play Steam games. And they published a teaser video. So, as is customary on the big show, because it's a teaser video for distribution, we got to play it, Noah. So they're showing their nice looking desktop. They have they've created the Atom desktop, which is a set of extensions that sit on top of GNOME. So they have not forked GNOME. It's a preset of extensions that work together that include like the Atom dock and the Atom dash, their own theme that looks really nice. And all this is so it takes your standard Fedora installation and just makes it much more elegant. And they have some exclusive artwork in here. Now, the thing is of course, as always happens, a lot of this stuff is already hit like the Arch user repository. In fact, a big thank you and shout out to Blackout24 in our chat room and subreddit, who has brought a lot of this stuff to the Arch user repository. So I installed it on my machine last night, so I've got a great looking Archbox now. And I didn't install this, but I did install the beta for a little bit this week, and it still says Fedora in most places because it's early days. But Noah, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. I've been wondering why somebody hasn't taken Fedora and made it a little more approachable. Do the things that legally Fedora and Red Hat won't do and morally won't do, but need to be done to make it approachable to a wider user base. What do you think about it?
Right. I think that there are a number of spins, and particularly ones that have been cooked a little longer than Ozone. And
Ozone's brand new.
About those. Yeah, right.
You got like Aurora.
Right, and so because there are a lot of other spins that exist on Fedora, and then I think that there are also people like me that I worry once I start to stray from Fedora, when things go wrong, then who do I go to? Now I'm essentially have to go to the Ozone people before they can hand it off.
Well, this is what I like about it. So they're not going crazy. Like, they're not doing their own fork of a desktop. This isn't the Luma desktop environment or whatever. This is extensions based on. So they're taking advantage of upstream that way.
Sure.
For example, to get some of the extra software they're using, they're not going crazy. They're just integrating RPM Fusion, which is probably something you would have done anyways once you installed Fedora, right? So in a lot of ways, what they're doing, the changes they're making are changes you are going to make anyways to make Fedora truly usable for you. But instead, so it's not like, it's sort of like in my vision, I see it as sort of like Antergos. Like, there's Arch users will be like, oh, don't talk to us about problems. That's Antergos, not Arch. But in reality, the only thing they're doing differently than upstream Arch is they have a repo that adds a LibreOffice installer, some artwork, and a couple other things. And otherwise, it's totally vanilla Arch. Well, I think that's kind of the same thing with Ozone. It's a lot more Fedora than it is anything else. So I think an experienced user like you would have no problem.
Right, but you can understand why. But an experienced user like me, I'm also very comfortable getting everything set up the way I want it in Fedora anyway. And you can understand why Fedora or Arch would be hesitant to offer official support for essentially another distribution, even if that other distribution only changes by maybe that 1% or maybe 1.5%. Because now maybe it's just they've added RPM Fusion and tweaked a couple icons. But down the road, how can you be sure that any of the changes that they make aren't going to negatively negatively affect other things, and then it becomes difficult on who to support. So I'm glad it exists. I think it's really cool, and I do think it's good that Fedora is a little bit more approachable, especially for people that sit down that are coming from things like Ubuntu, where you can install VLC, for example, is in the repo, and then you sit down at Fedora and it's not, and you start wondering why. Why is that piece of software?
It always has gotten me. Like, you have so many retakes on Ubuntu, you have retakes on Arch, and if you can make Arch Linux approachable with Manjaro and Antergos and things like that, then why isn't anybody doing it with Fedora? Now Ozone comes along. They say they do performance optimizations out of the box. I don't know what that means, but I'll take this part. They make it easy to install video drivers. I believe that, and I like that. I think that's a critical component missing for a lot of people to hear that, I can get Steam on Linux. There's this distribution that's made by these guys that work at Red Hat. I hear Red Hat's the #1 Linux distro. I should probably use their desktop version. Oh, now I have to install video drivers. And how horrible is it when you go to do something on Linux and you have that moment where you go, oh God, this feels like how I used to have to do things. I remember when I used to have to do... I had that experience recently when I went to go install the ATI driver, and it was way more complicated than installing the NVIDIA driver. And it wasn't that bad, but I was like, oh... Yeah, I remember when things used to be a little bit more challenging, and it's so Fedora, it still has a lot of that when it comes to that kind of stuff, and especially if I just want to get down and try Torchlight 2, or I want to play Dota 2, and I've heard that those things are available on Steam, and those are my favorite games because those games are hugely popular. Dota 2 alone, people are dedicated just to playing Dota 2, and you try to sit down and play it on Fedora, it's a total bomb. But if Ozone makes it easier, I think this could be huge for the Fedora project. And honestly, Noah, the thing is I think it's critically important that we get another desktop contender that is not Ubuntu. And we need somebody that has the backing of a company that can fight legal battles, that can negotiate deals with other companies, that has a presence that's respected and has a brand. And that's why Canonical is such a great backer for Ubuntu, and that's why Valve chose Ubuntu when they launched Steam on Linux. But we need somebody else who can be a contender in that space, because if something ever goes wrong with Ubuntu, like if they screw the pooch by converting their desktop over to Qt and nobody likes it for a few years and nobody wants to recommend Ubuntu, we really need something to recommend to people. And wouldn't it be great if that was a Red Hat-backed project, even if it was sort of one step removed, but at least it was backed by some company that there was a brand behind that people would have faith in. People, and when I say people, I mean people like Valve and business owners and CTOs and CIOs. Those people have to be able to make a choice, and right now it's always Ubuntu. Oh, we're going to do a deployment, it's Ubuntu in most cases. If it could be a Fedora base, that would be very good for the Linux community, just to give it some competition.
And frankly, I like the values, and I like the values that I see in Red Hat folks. When I meet Red Hat folks, when I talk to Red Hat folks, they care about the Linux desktop. And that's not to say that people at Canonical don't. But again, I see a lot more people working for Red Hat running Red Hat or Fedora than I see people working for Canonical running Ubuntu, and that says something.
And my point is, and just to underscore is, and I'm not advocating anything bad happen to Ubuntu, because what I would like to see is healthy competition there, right? To really kind of spur that stuff along. And if Corora and Ozone and just mainline Fedora, which is getting better on its own with Fedora Workstation 21 was an amazing release. 22 looks incredible. We're going to talk more about it later. If like that trifecta can bring Fedora up more and bring some natural competition, it's just going to make Ubuntu better too. Right? That's right. And that's going to be awesome. So
that's right. And no matter what you end up with, whether you end up with a Red Hat distribution or a Canonical distribution, you'll have what is the best because they've been fighting. They've been not fighting, but they have been competing with each other and driving one to one up their game, rather than saying, well, we've reached a point where the desktop is as good as it's going to get. Well, you won't be able to do that. You can't say things like that if somebody else is constantly trying to one up what you've done on the desktop.
Yeah.
So I agree with you 100%.
All right, so before we go, I want to plug our shirt that we're selling to raise funds for our initiative to get the crew out to Linux Fest Northwest, and it's not going very well. So if you've been on the fence, that we've met our goal. They tipped it. They will ship now, but we haven't even broke 100 shirts, which is kind of our cost point. You go to teespring.com/Linux. We're doing this. I know we've done some shirts in the past, and because of the slow trajectory of this one, this will probably be the last one we do for a little while. We might have one more in the pipeline, and then that's going to be it. I think just to kind of give it a break and kind of make them a little more exclusive again. And the reason why is we kind of hung our hat on using this to fund the Linux Fest Northwest trip. I can tell you it's not happening at 98 Shirts. So if you've been on the fence and you want to help us get the whole crew out to Linux Fest Northwest to not only do the best coverage of a fest we've ever done, but maybe also to get a little bit of that magic when the whole crew gets together, gets to sit down, have dinner, and come into the studio and talk face-to-face. You could probably produce some pretty great content. And we'd really like to make that happen because we think it's going to make all the shows better if the crew has a chance to get together. But I figure it's a couple $1,000s at least, maybe more per person, if you include flight and board. We're trying to work out, so we're talking to some folks to see if they can either pay their own or things like that, since the trajectory here is a little slow on the shirts. But we could use your help, and it's a great way to get yourself something and also help us out. You go to teespring.com/Linux. We have a T-shirt, a ladies' tee, a hoodie, the long sleeve shirt, which I like a lot, and a kid shirt too. And you can get them in multiple colors, and it's the black and white edition of the logo, which we had specially designed to make sure it would look excellent when we print it. And then when you show up to the fest, you get to rock the swag. But even if you're not going to the fest, you still get a great shirt, and you can walk around, and it's a conversation starter, because this is Linux Action Show in big letters with the Tux Penguin, and it's a surprising conversation starter about Linux. And then when we ever come to your area, which I think we might one day, you can rock it then. It's a good shirt. Teespring.com/Linux. Noah, we'll probably send you one. I don't think you have. Do you want a blue one, Noah? How about a nice blue one?
Yeah, I don't know. They all look good.
You always wear black, Noah. You're always wearing black.
Yeah,
I want to see you in blue. When we're out on the boat,
right.
I want you wearing a blue shirt.
You know where that black started? That black started back in high school, where I used to buy all my shirts from ThinkGeek, and they were always black shirts with, geeky phrases on them. And then, I don't know, the look.
Yeah, I used to do that too. I will say, the chat room's asking, I will say the long sleeve shirts are my favorite. I like the way they're cut. And I also, I think the thickness is perfect. Out of all my long sleeve shirts I have, the ones that with our swag on it, not just because they have our swag logos on it, but I just think they're the best long sleeve shirts too. Now, the chat room tells me I'm sick of shirts. It sucks, because we really need the help. But there is another way you can help out the network, and that's at patreon.com/today. This page here, we do the Tech Talk Today show. It's a daily tech show as a thank you to our patrons. It's a show I do as just saying thank you for supporting the network. This is also a way you can support our initiatives like this. We use the funds raised here for hardware initiatives and travel initiatives. And the nice thing about kicking in at the Patreon is it'll also support future fests as well. That's patreon.com/today. You also get access to behind-the-scenes stuff. And in a few shakes, probably in a week or two or sometime, Noah's going to be out here in a little while. Right, Noah? Yes, probably. Yep. We have kind of a secret mission that we'll tell you more about soon. He's going to be out here for. And I think when he's out here, we'll probably record some behind-the-scenes videos. Those go up to our patrons. So not only do you help with this fest, future fest, but you also get exclusive goodies at patreon.com/today. And this is really what we want to do. And the reason why we go this route is we want to make these trips as much about the coverage of the fest and the community as possible. I do believe there's space for sponsorships, but that adds complication and distraction. And it's not something I'm totally opposed to, especially if it facilitates us being able to make these conferences happen at all. Obviously, that's a route I would go. The thing I like about crowdsourcing these through the shirts and through the Patreon is it keeps our focus really based on the community, really just heads down on the game, and it just makes it very simple. It allows our focus to be very direct on the content, and it feels more direct to you, too. We're going to these conferences sort of sponsored by you to do the coverage for you, and I think that coverage of these fests is sorely missing in the Linux press. I think there's not enough. I don't think there's enough blog posts about it. I don't think there's enough coverage about it in general. I don't think there's enough podcasts covering it. And we have so much conflict in the Linux community. We're going to talk about the stuff going on with Linus and the code of conflict. We have so much hate around systemd. And you hear so often about how the BSD community is so much more gentle and so much more diplomatic to each other and rational in their discussion and discourse. And the thing is that is so 100% true about the Linux community. It's just it all happens at these events, at these conferences, all these human connections that happen that are so critical to the progress of open source, the direction of Linux, and that community aspect that matters the most with open source. And the best elements happen at these conferences, and then you never hear about them. The only thing you hear about is the fights that happen over mailing lists where people are talking to each other behind their screens and behind their keyboards, and they're monsters to each other. But you never hear about these amazing connections that happen at these conferences, and it's such a fundamental core piece to open source and Linux. And that's why I want to make sure that the Linux Action Show can put a spotlight on these events, because I believe it represents the very best of Linux open source and collaboration, and nobody's doing it properly. Nobody's covering it. And if we can go in there and cover these and be crowdfunded as we cover these, these. That, to me, is the genuine sweet spot of being able to give the light that these things need in the purest possible way. And that's why we try to crowdfund this. It's not because we're trying to milk money out of you guys. It's because we want to do this the best way possible, and we really care a lot about this. And so you can help us with that initiative by going to teespring.com/Linux or patreon.com/today. Noah, is there anything else you want to add before I wrap up?
Well, it's one of those things where I always question the motives of anyone that I listen to. I always wonder when I hear people on the radio, when I hear people on TV, why did they advocate for that product, or why did they like that thing? And working with you, one thing I've noticed is you are so particular about sponsors that you'll take on, because you will only take on a sponsor that aligns very closely with your ideals and values. But the nice thing about crowdsourcing that is you become responsible only to the audience. You're not responsible to any company or any of their interests. And I think that it provides for optimum honesty and optimum coverage and stuff like that. So all around, I think that's the way to go. And if you're a person that doesn't like to hear the ads, or if you think those are distracting, that's a great way to step up and say, essentially, put my money where my mouth is and say, let me help out.
And as we do this, we learn it's hard to do this kind of coverage right, like to do it using Linux, to do it in a way where it doesn't bankrupt you, right? Like it's expensive to travel around and bring equipment and stuff.
Right. Well, not only that, anytime you're doing it with Linux, that means oftentimes the way to use Linux with something is to take something that could have been done less expensive in software and do it in hardware. The problem with that is there's a dramatic increase in your costs of the hardware to do that. And so, we can do video switching inside of software, but if you want to take that outside and do it, the video switcher is what, $15,000 to get to get a box that would do it right. So when you start looking at those things, you have to start asking, what is possible, and Linux becomes more feasible and more possible when people are able to contribute.
Yeah, and I look back at the last 8+ years of the show, and I think to myself, man, did we miss documenting this stuff, because it is so more important than we realized it was. So now I'm impatient. Now I want to get out there and I want to serve the community this information as fast as possible, to really get out there, because it's holy crap, there's something magical happening here that we're all losing sight of, and it's not going away. We're just not talking about it. And what we've seen over the years is we attend Linux Fest. The attendance goes up, it gets bigger and better, it gets cooler every year, and it's there's a story here to tell that it isn't going away. It's getting bigger and better and brighter, and so it's not too late to jump in. I just wish we had been covering it all along, and if we had been, it would be obvious why we should be. And once we start covering it more regularly, I think it's going to totally click with the audience. So anyways, I could go on for hours about this. We should probably wrap it up right there. So Noah, let's do the news.
Hey, it's the news, and this episode is brought to you by
Ting.com. Ting is mobile that makes sense. Ting is our mobile service provider, and it's no contract. That's what I love about Ting. Well, also, I love paying only for what I use. In fact, if it wasn't for that, my small business wouldn't be able to have the sales that we do. I tell you what, I feel like I spoil. I feel like a baller. I got an iPhone 5, an HTC One, and a Nexus 5. What's up? Back in the day, I've been $300 into a cell phone bill for that easily, right? And now I'm $50 a month, tops. That's my high bill, right? And it's sometimes as low as $40 a month or $30 a month. So it's pretty sweet being on Ting when you only pay for what you use. And you get hotspots, you get your tethering, you get all that stuff built in, caller ID. I got my Nexus 5 right here. Now it never leaves my side. I switched it over to GSM, and I got Lollipop up on this business. I was running multi-ROM before, and I was bouncing around. But now I've just I've committed to Lollipop for a month on the Nexus 5 using Ting. I'm going to go all in once I go GSM. It's mind-blowing. It is mind-blowing to have an unlocked device that I truly own, that I can just flash operating systems on, that sits on a network that I just put a SIM card in, and I'm on the network now. I'm not in a contract. I don't have a termination fee. I feel like it's just open to me. And it's the raw dog Google experience, just the Lollipop ROM. It is honestly the best Android experience I think you can get. I don't know about the phone itself. I love the Nexus 5, but when you have Ting, you have a service that has really no gotchas. You've got a phone that is unlocked, that is truly yours. It feels so. You feel you feel empowered. You feel like it's yours finally, and you're not getting taken advantage of. And they just take your minutes, your messages, and your megabytes. They add them all up, and whatever bucket you fall into, that's all you pay. And if you go to last.ting.com, las.ting.com, not only do you support the big show, but you'll also get a $25 credit on your plan if you're going to bring a Ting device. Like I brought over the Evo 4G, but they have so many compatible devices now. They have a blog post up, but because now they're accepting GSM devices and Sprint compatible CDMA devices, the range of devices you can bring now is crazy. Like Noah's bringing over like these ancient Nokia devices. He's getting them rocking on the Ting service, and he's got like the bat line over there. I love it.
I was gonna say. So you upgraded your GSM experience
Nexus 5
with Lollipop.
Yeah.
I didn't upgrade to Lollipop. I was previously using that little guy, that Nokia from circa 1998, and it works amazing. I charge it one time, and then I have it all week. But the problem is when I need to charge
a week-long battery.
It has a stupid little proprietary charger that doesn't work. I don't like that.
Yeah.
So what I did was I went to some Chinese manufacturer and I bought this. And this is to give you an idea
how
how small
Noah?
it is.
Is that a calculator or a phone?
But watch this. No, it's a phone. It's a GSM phone, but watch this. I take my wallet, put my phone in my wallet.
Oh my
because
gosh.
it is a credit card. So there's my wallet, and that's
you have a cell phone in your wallet right now.
I have a cell phone in my wallet. And the great thing is, like, it has actually decent call quality. Like, the audio quality is actually not that bad, considering it's a credit card. It's a credit card that's a phone. It's a GSM phone that's a credit card.
I want a picture of that, too, for that thing I'm working on. Can you do that for me?
And it's I can. I wish you would have told me the other day. When
I didn't know you had something cool like that. I didn't know you had something cool like that.
Yeah, well, I didn't. I didn't get it until later. I took the picture. I sent it to you. For the Nokia, and then later that day, because it came from Hong Kong. So, and it was funny because the phone was made in Hong Kong, but the language is like Italian. So I was in the mumble room last night, and I'm like, who knows what la phone configure? And then they were walking me through how to change the language to English. So. Yeah.
Go to last.ting.com to get started. And if you could just grab that, the SIM card, if you got a device, you can drop it in. The new Ting GSM SIM, it's $9. And what I love about it is it fits all different sizes. Like you just pop out, like if you need a micro SIM or a regular SIM, like you just pop out the size you need. Last.ting.com. And you'll get a $25 service credit. You'll probably be able to use that for quite a while. And before we wrap up, I love me the app picks, and this one's one I actually got this week. I recommend it too. So Kyra's here with our app pick of the week for Android. Take it, Kyra!
Why did the chicken cross the road? No, I refuse to say that. That's ridiculous. I'm Kyra, and this is the Ting app of the week.
Go, Kyra!
As you may have guessed, Crossy Road is a game where you literally cross the road. It's a super simple concept, but the lure of beating that high score and maybe unlocking a new character from the dozens available is what will keep you going. Tap to jump forward. Tap left or right to, you guessed it, jump left or right.
It's fun.
Grab coins along the way.
Yeah.
Timing is key to avoid getting hit by a car, truck, or train.
Or train, yeah.
Likewise, timing is what will get you across the water hazards safely. You start out as a chicken. However, for every 100 coins you accumulate, you'll get a chance to unlock new characters. This is a freemium game. Dropping a few bucks will net you some hard-to-get characters that might help you out. Crossy Road is undeniably fun. It gets bonus points for not being too heavy-handed in its attempts to part you from your money. In other words, you won't get locked out from playing for half an hour while you wait for more lives to become available. Crossy Road is available in both the Play Store and the App Store. If you're looking for a fun, addictive little time waster, it will certainly meet your criteria. As the name of the show implies, we have new episodes every week. Hit the subscribe button and you'll never miss an app. I'm Kyra, and thanks for watching.
Last.ting.com. Go get started. And I will also recommend that game. It's actually pretty fun. You can check out Ting's YouTube channel for other clips. Also, you can follow them on Twitter. They're at TingFTW. And sometimes they're tweeting really interesting things like deals. I missed they were giving a discount away on a Moto X2, and I totally missed it. Gosh, I wanted that so bad. Last.ting.com. And a big thanks to Ting for sponsoring the Linux Action Show. Noah, I know you're not a big Steam gamer, but screw you because I love it. And I'm super excited about this next story, so double screw you because Steam just hit over 1,000 games on Linux. 1,000 games. Ladies and gentlemen, when this show started, there were like 4 games that were commercially being actively developed for Linux. The Loki games had crashed and burned. Of course, there were open source games, but there were really, except for Unreal Tournament and that extra binary on the Quake 3 CD, pretty much nothing shipping for Linux when this show started commercially at the time. Boom! Over 1,000 titles for the Linux operating system on Steam. Absolutely incredible because it's actually 1,005 games for Steam and SteamOS. That's out of 48,000 games total. Oh, but still, 20% of all of the titles on Steam are now available for Linux. This is way, way, way better than the Mac was doing at this point in time, and a great little talking point for SteamOS machines. When somebody says, how many games are available for SteamOS? You can say, over 1,000. Over 1,000. Right, Noah? That's always good as a sales pitch.
I love Steam. I'm glad when Steam wins at the games that they play.
Yeah, Noah. Shut up, Noah. Such a pain in the butt. All right. How about this one? You know how Google likes to do stuff and then stop doing stuff? Well, Google's doing a little bit of that, and maybe it's not so bad. Google is shutting down Google of Code, the home for open source projects if you wanted to host them on Google. Google says to meet developers where they are, we ourselves are migrating nearly 1,000 of our own open source projects from Google Code to GitHub. As developers have migrated away from Google Code, a growing share of the remaining projects were spam or just abuse. Beginning today, we have disabled new project creation on Google Code. We will be shutting down the service about 10 months from now on January 25th. 2016, the day before my birthday. So on March 12th, that was a couple of days ago, new project creation has been disabled. August 24th of this year, the site goes read-only, so you can still check out stuff. On January 25th, 2016, project hosting service is closed. You can get a tarball of your project sources, issues, and wikis for the rest of 2016. The simplest way to migrate off Google Code, though, is they have a Google Code to GitHub exporter tool, which provides an automated way to migrate the project source, issues, and wikis, but double-check it because some people have had some problems. No, my birthday is the 26th, not the 25th. So anyways, yeah. What do you think, Noah? Is this surprising to you or a good move on Google's part?
Yeah, no, it's hugely surprising to me, and I don't think it's a good move. You know how many projects that I've looked at that have been linked to the Google Code page?
Well, I feel like it's our desktop pick this morning. The shell.
Okay.
That was a Google Code. That was a Google Code project.
It was in the repo, but it's one of those things where I find that all the time. And then there are some obscure things, like for example, there was a script for fixing my Pixel so that it had this weird problem with the TPM chip where every second time it would go into suspend, the computer would reboot, which, as you can imagine, is a little frustrating. And the people that developed the script collaborated all that on Google Code and then eventually released the script, and it was amazing. So I'm really disappointed.
At the same time, though, if they were launching Google Code today, I would be like, "Oh, Google, not invented here syndrome. Can't just use GitHub where everybody else is. Yeah. What's their problem? Always have to do their own thing." So, isn't this just Google kind of playing along and being like, "Well, look, Microsoft's going to GitHub. They put .NET on GitHub. If Microsoft's putting .NET on GitHub, maybe Google." Because if you think about it from that perspective, Google now kind of looks like the weirdo, like the guy that won't play with everybody else.
Yeah. I guess I can see that. I guess I can see it both ways. It just
GitHub just dominates now.
Once you have something rolled out, I suppose the other thing is too is, and what we don't know is Google probably has definitive numbers of how many people are actually using.
And they said it's crap. So they were saying it was becoming crap. Yeah. I like competition. That's the only thing that jumps out at me about it. And this definitely makes GitHub a unquestionable champion powerhouse. And also, for some reason, it makes me think maybe we should be promoting GitLab a little more. Like maybe people should be rolling their own GitLabs just to kind of keep some pressure on GitHub to keep things real, I guess.
Right.
All right. I want to talk about one more story, unless there's any other thoughts you had on that.
Nope.
Okay. So we covered this on Linux Unplugged this week, and when we covered it, we were just kind of, this happened because this is in the mailing list, and it's not maybe a big deal. Maybe it is. What do you guys think? And it was this code of conflict that was committed to the Linux kernel that sort of says, we're going to handle issues this way. People are human. There's going to be conflicts in an important project like this, but this is the step to resolution. And the Linux Foundation liked it. It was written by Greg K.H., and it was submitted to the Linux kernel by Linus Torvalds. That was what we knew on Tuesday. Well, today is Sunday, and by Sunday, it has become a complete and total internet drama that is completely fueled by absolutely no basis in fact, just rampant speculation to get web clicks. And we'll start with the mother of all web clicks, Business Insider, who wrote the mother of all headlines. The Linux Foundation wants to rein in its insult-spewing leader. Now, keep in mind, Linus is the one that committed the code patch to the kernel himself, right? Okay, so let's bear that in mind. So they write, on Monday, the Linux Foundation kind of sort of slapped him on the wrist when they issued a new code of conflict policy that they declared personal insults or abuse are not welcome. Then, This Business Insider article goes on to state all of the mean things Linus has done in the last 6 months. And then they point out that it wasn't Torvalds, sort of implying there's conflict within the ranks. It wasn't Torvalds who wrote this policy. It was his right-hand man, Greg Hartman, who wrote it and cutely submitted it as a patch to the Linux system. That meant that the ultimate keeper of Linux, Linus Torvalds, has to see the patch and approve it, which he did, adding public comment. Let's see how this works. And then, right after that line, it says, for a flavor of the kind of abusive programmer, an abuse you might expect from Linus Torvalds, take a look at his rant on Friday on Google+. And then they paste his Google+ rant about the Android calendar, which was completely legitimate. And then that's how they end the article. That's how they end that particular article, really contributing nothing to the discussion other than painting it as the Linux Foundation is reining Linus in and he's going up against Greg. So then the Tech Republic covers it. Linux kernel patch release code of conduct. A little bit better there, I would say. But they say developing within the Linux world isn't always smiles and sharing with kumbaya. They talk about this new patch. And they kind of go into, again, more drama, implying drama where there's not necessarily any drama that we know to exist. But the Tech Republic one's not bad. Then we go to Linux Insider, and they called the Linux kernel's new Play Nice patch. Again, not a bad headline, but sort of putting a spin on it that doesn't really need to be there. And all of these articles kind of go into previous rants and drag up all things like that. And I don't really think they add much to the conversation. What do you think?
So let me start with this. First of all, I think that I completely understand where people are coming from when they say that they feel offended by some of the things that Linus says, right? So, for example, when he was interviewed about asking how he feels his conduct when he says that he wishes they could retroactively abort people, or that he is surprised that they're so stupid that he's surprised that they were able to find their mother's nipple when they were little. Things like that, I don't know, provide necessarily any constructive criticism to building code, right? At the same time, I'm not sure I even believe that Linus himself cares. He himself he's very open to the fact that he's going to call it as he sees it, and he doesn't care if it offends people. And as he correctly points out, there are hundreds of thousands of people that you can work with and around, and in the kernel, I would imagine probably a couple hundred people that you could contribute your code to and work with them. You don't have to work directly with Linus, so he picks the people that he works really well with, and this idea that we all have to get along is kind of silly, right? And so if you don't get along and harsh criticism isn't for you, then work with somebody else. Me personally, I'm the kind of person that wants to hear stuff directly to my face, and I want to hear exactly how it is, even if it's harsh. Mm-hmm. I don't have a problem when people walk up to me and tell me a cold, hard truth. And if there's some personal insults thrown in there, whatever, I don't care. So and I don't know that I necessarily believe that kind of attitude is going to change even with this Linux kernel patch.
That's a good point.
I don't think we have necessarily should expect it to.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I guess what I don't like is sort of, I was just talking at the end of the last segment about how we have this, we need to I want to shed more light on the positive aspects of the Linux and open source communities, and then we have these articles here, like so the Linux Insider one, and I don't really want to pick on Linux Insider, but this is, they say. This is a quote from the article I pulled and put in the show notes. Whether this tactic pans out to solve the growing friction within the Linux community remains to be seen. Okay, the growing friction within the Linux community?
Right.
I don't even know if I accept that. What I accept is that we have more coverage of the friction. But I actually, if you look at the Linux kernel mailing list, the amount of flare-ups has gone dramatically down. Right? Yeah. The actual conflict rate is down. Right. The coverage of the conflicts are way up, but the conflicts themselves are way, way down. But this article just states that the friction is going up within the Linux community, just sort of setting that now as the new level of discourse in the community. They say this
as if that wasn't the way that he always was to begin with.
Right. Or like I was talking about earlier with the Tech Republic article. Tech Republic article says, some would say the center of the problem is Linus Torvalds himself, and that his blunt, cavalier attitude towards dealing with other developers has led to too much tension within the ranks. However, one man holds such a massive responsibility for that much code, it only makes sense that he'd carry a sharp stick in that tone. The problem comes with when the contributors begin calling out Torvalds publicly. This happened recently, and then he ties it in with the System D debate, when Lennart Pottering called Torvalds out for encouraging hate speech and attacks. Partnering went so far to say the Linux community is a sick place to be in. And then he segues into the entire systemd debate and all of that, which is totally unrelated to the Linux kernel and the way Linus behaves. But he uses that, and rightfully so, to make an interesting, compelling point, but it's confusing the reader to think that somehow Linus is responsible now for the systemd debacle.
Right. So, and let's talk about this. If your goal, if they believe so strongly, okay, that we have a toxic environment and that there are problems, when the Linux Foundation puts their foot forward and says, okay, let's try and do something about it. Let's try and do something constructive about it. Why tear that down? Why spin that into a negative thing? Why? But if you're so concerned about hosting this toxic environment, then why wouldn't you do everything in your power to try to promote a positive change? And so when a company or when a foundation comes forward, and when Linus himself comes forward and says we're going to do a better job of trying to be nicer to people and stay away from personal insults, you would think that would be a great headline, that finally the Linux moves forward. We've had a toxic past, but things are going to get better now. But instead, it's almost like they need that negativity, and if that goes away, then that takes away from their headlines, and I think that is it's a poor attitude, and I think it's a poor take on Linux.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the advantages why I like LWN.net, is because they do slow publication and they do a weekly update, and they don't have to have a couple of articles a day. I think that's one of the reasons podcasts are a little better about this too. Same thing. It's a weekly release. They don't have to have something compelling every single day. Well, Tech Talk Today does, but thankfully, see, the other problem is when you're just covering Linux and open source, it's a narrow spectrum. And so you really kind of got to work with any source material you're given in some cases.
Yeah, but you could work with that stuff without turning it into, without spinning it in this to making it into something that it's not to begin with.
Yeah.
I think it's unnecessary.
I agree. All right, well, let's move on and talk about NTP. He's the guy that's been dubbed Father of Time might be calling it quits. Not all is well within the NTP open source project, and the number of volunteer contributors examine bug reports and write fixes has shrunk over the lifespan of the project. Even though its importance has increased, its ongoing development and maintenance now rests mostly on the shoulders of Sten, and that's why NTP faces a turning point. Sten, who works sporadically on his own consulting business, has given himself a deadline. Garner more financial support by April, or look for regular work. Now, this is the guy that develops NTP. Sam Ramey, the CEO of Cloud Foundry, stated that Sten's work at the Open Commute Summit in 2015 on March 11th said that he was scraping by, and that as he continued to work on NTP, and that we have to do something. Now, I wanted to stop here before we move on to the potential solution, and I wanted to kind of reflect on the fact that this is the same state that led us to things like Heartbleed. And there are critical open source components out there that we depend on that almost amazingly so are like one person. And if that one person stops working or wins the lottery, we don't have a critical piece of infrastructure, or something like Heartbleed works in there. And to that end, I find that this just seems to be an ongoing problem that we don't have a good way of addressing. What do you think, Noah?
The thing with Heartbleed was, and this came to light, was that companies that relied on this would have zero problem contributing some capital towards the development of things like SSL, or OpenSSL rather. They were falling short on that. Isn't this kind of the same thing? Shouldn't places that rely on NTP, for example, Google and Microsoft and Apple and all these companies, shouldn't they all be contributing?
This brings us to that infrastructure initiative that the Linux Foundation is coordinating, and it brings us to the potential replacement. It's being led by Paul Hemmingkamp, and we've talked about this on TechSnap quite a bit, and a little bit on BSD Now. He is being paid by that foundation money to rewrite NTP. And I'm repeating what Alan has told me, so forgive me if I get the details wrong. I'll get him to try to repeat it soon. Paul looked at the NTP project and said, all right, I can take this over, and looked at it and said, this is unmaintainable. There's no way. This project's 20 years old. It's a disaster. It has to be written from scratch, and now he's taking that on. Now, I might have that wrong, but I believe he's already being paid to do that, and he has a running blog that I have linked in the show notes where he's talking about this, and he's been giving talks. Like, he just gave a talk at FOSDEM a few days ago, And he might be at the Tokyo BSDCon with Alan right now. I'm not sure. But so it's something is happening there, Noah. But you're right. The problem is sometimes these things go so long without being noticed that it's almost too late.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, how about we talk about your Fedora, your beloved Fedora, for a second?
My beloved Fedora. I do love me some Fedora.
I feel like I've been waiting to say this for a really, 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 really long time. Fedora.
You're switching
22.
to Fedora.
No.
Oh.
No, come on.
Okay. All
That
right.
I've never been waiting to say. I've never been waiting to say that.
I've been waiting for you to say that.
No, but I have been waiting to say this. Starting with Fedora 22, the login graphical screen will be starting with Wayland by default. That's a big
awesome.
deal. Wayland out of the box at the login screen by default starting in Fedora 22. This is a huge moment for Wayland. And here's why. And it's super genius. So you got it in 21. You could choose Wayland as a selection from like the GDM login manager or whatever the hell. But starting in 22, for most users, you'll see the login screen powered by Wayland. The goal is to progress Fedora to the point where you could replace X altogether with Wayland whenever it appears. The login screen is the first vital step towards this goal. The reasoning behind this is that the login screen is sufficiently isolated and contained, making it ideal for a first place to switch to Wayland. Even though some video device drivers will not work, i.e. the NVIDIA proprietary drivers, so what will happen is when you have the NVIDIA driver loaded, it will just automatically fall back to X11. And it'll just do it seamlessly. And furthermore, if the Wayland version of the login screen encounters like an issue and crashes even with a compatible driver, it'll also then just start X in the background seamlessly, and just you'll see a GDM using X, and you might see
that's awesome.
You might see a flicker or something, but no bigs. Yeah. So just a small note, Fedora 22, and I think Alpha 1 just hit the web as well, if you want to start submitting some bug notes to them and make it even better. I mean, wouldn't it be great if the first distro that shipped with Wayland at boot by default had some really great bug testing, so it really was successful when it launched.
Yeah, I can always count on Fedora to be on the edge and getting everything right.
Yeah.
Those people from Red Hat, they really do it right compared to those Arch people.
Oh, like I was going to let you just have that, and then you had to go there. I could switch over to Wayland right now. You want to know what you got?
And you have been able to do that for how long?
For a very long time. A very long time. All right, kid. You know what? It's time we go get in the ham shack, Noah. That's all the news for this week. Something new on the show for me this week. I don't really know much about what we're going to talk about. I'm going to learn, but it's on a subject I've wanted to know a lot more about for a long time. Ham radio. And Noah says you might consider it the original open source. Well, he'll tell us more about that and about his ham radio setup under Linux. But first, let me tell you more about our segment sponsor, and that's System 76. Go over to System 76 and get a machine built to run Linux. I'm talking no more concerns about if your Bluetooth works or your wireless works or if your display is going to work or your video card. No more of that. It's built to run Linux, and it ships with Ubuntu 14.10 or 14.04 if you want it. They got a bunch of great laptops to pick from, desktops, and brand new servers. Run the most popular cloud OS in the world on System 76 servers. It's a great way to go. Go over to system76.com and get yourself something really nice and tell them the Linux Action Show sent you. All right, Noah, is there anything you want to set up, or should I just roll the clip? You tell me.
Yeah, you can just start it.
Okay, so this is Noah's setup here. He recorded this for us. I'm assuming probably in the middle of the night last night, and
if you're a sharp-eyed viewer, you'll notice it. I start these things. I mean well, right? Like I start planning on I think I started on Wednesday, and so you'll notice like the first parts of it are filmed with bright, nice, sunny, lit places, and then they're really well. But if you notice the timestamp on the screen cap, which is towards the end of the segment, you'll notice it's like 4 a.m. or something.
Oh my gosh! All right, with that, here we go.
You might say that ham radio was the original open source. The two communities share a lot of core values in common. It's this idea that we own the technology that we've purchased, that we can open it up, that we can play with it, and when necessary, that we can modify it. Just like you might scoff at an Apple user for wanting their automagical button to make everything happen magically and automatically, ham radios for a long, long time have scoffed at the idea that you would trust your personal communication to some corporate entity or some business or some governing body. It seems silly to them. Do you remember things like SOPA? Do you remember things like net neutrality? Why didn't we have similar issues in the ham radio community? Well, the answer is simple. There's no one place to go after them. There's no one central place that you can round all the hams up and tell them this is how you're going to do something or this is how you're not going to do something. You might even say it's the original peer-to-peer network. Now, some people might ask, isn't ham radio old? Isn't it outdated? Isn't it useless at this point? Don't we have the internet? Aren't there better alternatives? I have my cell phone. Why do I need ham radio? And the answer is very, very simple. And the answer is that, first of all you need is the equipment that you own to operate it. I don't need a backbone. I don't need a business to provide me a network. I don't need an ISP to give me a connection. I don't need a cell phone provider, okay? I own that equipment. I can make it operate. As long as I have available power, which I can get from solar or an AC wallet or a battery, I can make my ham radio equipment work. Now, what can we do with ham radio? Well, really, the possibilities are endless. We can send video, we can send audio. When we need to, we can send high-quality FM. When we need to maximize and conserve bandwidth, we can take a given frequency spectrum and we can split it up and transmit on the upper sideband and the lower sideband, so essentially we're getting twice for our money. It's a very innovative hobby. If you're a ham radio operator, you're going to love this segment. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to go over some gear. I'm going to go over the software, show you how you can make that work on Linux. If you're not a ham radio operator, don't shut us off quite yet. If you like Linux, if you're into open source, if you like the idea of the Librem laptop and the System 76 laptop, then you're going to like ham radio, okay? It's the same concept, just with a little bit of a spin. Hands down, one of the most interesting things about ham radio is the idea of equipment, right? You can buy the hardware and you can play with it. So, what do you need to get started? This is a basic amateur radio kit. So, what it is an FM transceiver, an antenna, a microphone, and a power source. Now, the power source is the one thing that varies drastically. You can do everything from a solar panel to a extra car battery that you have laying around to a 12-volt DC power supply, which I have here. So go ahead and plug our power supply in, and the radio comes on, and we take our antenna and throw it somewhere, and take our microphone, hang it on the microphone hook, and I am ready to go. This is what I need to communicate. I don't need anything else. I can talk to everyone in the city with just this setup alone. So this doesn't require any infrastructure, doesn't require any backbones, and it is relatively cost effective. I think this radio was about $160. I think the antenna was, I made it, so I guess it's, parts is probably 10 or 15 bucks. And then, whatever a battery is, or if you want a power supply, they're probably $80, $90. But for just a couple $100, you can get started and you can have a kit. Now, you can't actually get on the air and operate. You have to get a license from the FCC. But what does getting a license entail? Well, actually, as it turns out, it's not that hard. They have a question pool, a group of questions that they give you the correct answer and all of the wrong answers. And then they put all of those questions, possible questions, into a pool and publish them every year. And then they'll randomly select 35 questions and test you on it. So you can go to the FCC website, and we'll have a link in the show notes, and you can download the full question pool and read every question they're going to ask you and read every available answer, both correct and wrong, and then go take your test. If you can't pass the 35 question test where they're going to give you the questions and answers ahead of time, I don't know what to say. Radio waves are a lot like this bouncy ball. If I was to make the ball make smaller hops across the table, I would cover a very short distance, but very densely, as opposed to if I made bigger hops, I would cover a wider distance, but there would be gaps in between. So to communicate long distances, you've probably heard of people that are hams that talk all the way around the world and things like that. We can't use a radio like this. This is a VHF radio. It's meant for in-town local communication. Although there are ways to extend the range, what we really need is a radio that's designed for communicating across the world. Let's take a look at what that looks like. If you want to talk across the world, the VHF radio that we showed you earlier isn't going to quite work. What you're going to need is an HF radio. This is an example of an HF radio, and as discussed earlier with the bouncy ball, it makes long hops. The basic principle is the same. We need a microphone, a radio, and a power supply. The difference is the antenna is going to vary a little bit. With the VHF antenna, it took up maybe just a couple feet here on the floor, but an HF antenna might take up 50, 60, maybe even 70 feet, depending on what kind of antenna you buy and who you buy it from. Mine takes up the majority of the face of my house. But with this radio, you'd be able to talk all over the world. Of course, there are other options. You can, of course, mount an antenna to your car and communicate that way. I know a lot of people that do that, and it works out really well for them. Personally, I prefer to do it downstairs in the ham shack. Before we can talk about what to look for in software on Linux for ham radio, we need to know what that software needs to do. Here's an example of my first logbook, and essentially it's a spiral-bound book with columns and rows that allow me to log the information as I make contacts. Things you'd want to know, of course, the date, the frequency that you made the contact with, the mode. How are you making that contact? Is it traditional FM? Is it the lower sideband, upper sideband? Are you using Morse code? Are you using PSK? Are you communicating by connecting your computer to the radio and then transmitting, an electronic message that way? How much power did you use to make the message? What time did the contact start? Who did you make the contact with? What time did the contact end, and then how were you able to hear that person, understand them? Did their signal come in strong? Did their signal come in weak? And were you able to understand what they were telling you? And additionally, then they have a column here for comments. Now, one of the old ways that we used to confirm a context was something like this, which is a QSL card. So it's essentially a ham radio postcard that says, hey, we talked on this specific date, you send me your contact info and I'll send you mine, and then of course the frequency and such is written on the card. This has largely been, if not replaced, at least added to with the advent of online QSL cards, which, as we'll see in a moment, you can tie a lot of those online services into the software that works on Linux. If playing with the ham radios didn't grab your attention before, we're about to get to the Linux. Now I'm going to show you some of the software that I use on Linux to make ham radio possible. It's not exactly the same as it is in Windows or Mac, but that's okay. As long as you're willing to open up your mind and accept a slightly different workflow, you can still accomplish the same things. The first piece of software I want to talk about is Klog. Klog is a general purpose logger or a contest logger. What is a ham radio contest, you might ask? It's a time where ham radio operators attempt to contact as many stations as we can in a very short amount of time. Ordinarily, when we're talking, it's more of a conversation style. I'll say hello, you'll say hello. I'll ask how the weather is, you'll tell me how the weather is. You'll ask how my weather is, so on and so forth. In a contest, there's a very specific and deliberate set of exchange. So, for example, November sweepstakes, I would give my call sign, my signal strength report, and a serial number and my locator. So KC0SKE, I have you 5x9, you're talking to North Dakota, your serial number is 1724, the serial number being the amount of contacts I've made. And then they would read back a similar, and we would move on. It would be very inconsiderate to during a contest, to sit there and try to gabber with somebody. When you're doing that kind of operation, it is absolutely imperative that you have a logger that will allow you to enter in the information that you need to get in quickly and move on. Let's take a look at the screen of Klog. You'll notice here that I have a field for my contact. So I can put in KC0REL. That's Alex's call sign. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select single sideband. Now once I've selected a mode, it's going to keep that there, and I'll press Alt-O to log the contact. Now you'll notice it'll keep me on 20 meters and single sideband, and I can log an additional contact. So I might do KC0ZLG. I'm going to press Alt-O, and it's going to log that contact. And as you can see, I'm down here, I'm getting a serial number, I'm getting the date, the time, of course the call sign, the RST report. Now because I've selected single sideband, it ghosts the tone part of the RST. RST being readability, signal strength, and tone. How well can I understand what you're telling me? How strong is your signal coming into my station? And if we were using Morse code, how good is the tone? Or what is the quality of the tone, rather? You'll notice the tone is ghosted, but if I were to select CW or Morse code, it would then open that option up so I can enter it. Of course, it also gives me the option to do separate transmit and receive frequencies, so I can log duplex contacts. For things like November sweepstakes, where it requires a locator, or if I wanted to add their name or their home location, I can put stuff like that in. Now this does have a tie-in for DX cluster. On this particular box I don't have that set up, but it can go out to the internet and tell you where the hot spots, so to speak, are for making contacts. Now the second piece of software I want to talk about is Qtel, or Echolink. Now if you're familiar with Echolink, Echolink is essentially taking ham radio and connecting it to the internet so that we can talk even wider ranges, or sometimes smaller ranges, but with the convenience of a computer. With Echolink, I don't actually have to have a radio. I can actually make a contact on the computer. The computer will go from computer to computer and eventually wind up at somebody else's radio. So here you can see the IP address and the call sign and the location for all of these Echolink nodes. And I can click on them and I can connect. I actually don't want to connect right now, but I would be able to connect to those, and I can actually operate Echolink. Now, Echolink is traditionally a Windows-only software, so I think it's really important that you understand there are clients, there is software available for Linux, you just have to know where to look. This is Qtel, and then there is a server component called SVX Link that you have to have, and those, of course, will be in the show notes. The last piece of software I want to talk about is LinPSK. Now, LinPSK is a PSK software, so essentially it's sending text messages over ham radio. I told you before in the introduction that some people think that ham radio is just playing with Morse code, or some people think that it's only voice. You can actually send text messages with ham radio, and more importantly, we can do it inside of Linux. So I might put CQ, CQ, CQ. CQ, if you run those two letters quickly together, it says the words seek you. And so effectively, that is the traditional protocol for trying to call any station. CQ, CQ, CQ. I'm calling anyone. Can anyone talk to me? I would simply click activate, and it would start transmitting. Now, I have my rig disconnected because I want to show you the piece of hardware that you need to make this work. This is a serial to USB interface. It is entirely natively compatible with Linux, and as you know by now, when I say natively compatible with Linux, I don't mean they have some driver, you have to go to some site and compile some program to get it to work. No. You take this device, you plug it into your computer, you get a serial port. And most of the rig controls, or at least the my Yaesus, have serial connections. So I think the newer ones are shipping with USB, but if you have an older one like I do, then you're going to need a serial port. Now, this particular adapter is made by Dynex. I use it for a lot of different things, but I have one dedicated to ham radio, and it's what allows me to use the PSK31. When having conversations in the chat room, the mumble room, and of course through email, a lot of you fell into two groups. Those of you who wanted to know more about ham radio and Linux, and you already were hams, and those of you that weren't hams but didn't quite know what the hobby was about and wasn't sure exactly how to get started. For those of you who want to get started, I would point you to the ARRL, the Amateur Radio Relay League. They're the national organization that fight for amateur radio rights, so to speak. They're the ones that defend the literally millions of dollars of bandwidth that we're sitting on, making sure that those bands are set aside and free from interference from things like broadband over power line, so that we can continue to use them for years to come. The book, Now You're Talking, which is available on Amazon, we'll have a link in the show notes. That's going to let you understand the technology and the questions that they're going to ask you on the test. Again, the test is a published question pool. They're going to give you the correct answers and the wrong answers ahead of time. They're going to give those to you in a text document. Again, that will be in the show notes. You can read every question that you would need to take, or every question that they could possibly ask you on the test, and then they'll simply pick 35 of those. I don't know what to tell you if you can't pass the test, that they're going to give you the questions and answers ahead of time. I mean, it's really not that hard. Of course, you can always reach out to me, noah@jupiterbroadcasting.com. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. And, of course, if you already are a ham, then I guess I'll see you on the airwaves. So, 73 to all of my ham radio friends out there, I hope you found this to be an interesting segment of LAS, and we'll hand it back to you, Chris, at the studio.
Noah, that's awesome, and the chat room totally is digging on your setup there. If you didn't get a chance to watch the video version of this week's episode of LAS, that's a pretty cool setup you have there. Is that your ham shack / workstation battle station there?
Yeah, that's where I live 12 plus hours of my life.
Wow.
12 plus hours of my life most days.
That's a heck of a setup. Have you ever been able to, now you can do like packet data transmission. So you mentioned text messages. Right. Can you also, could you transmit like a JPEG?
Right. So you could. Yeah, you sure could. You can do PSK31. You can send data. Again, the amount of bandwidth you're looking at, my privileges cover 14.225 to 14.350. So what is that? That's a couple megahertz that I have to work with. And then of that, it's split in half because we're only transmitting on half the sideband, and you have to be considerate. So the more space I'm taking up by transmitting, a lot of stuff, then that's less people that can be on that band. So
I can't believe your antenna though takes up the side of your house. That Your wife is.
Yeah, my wife was really happy about that when I said, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put this tower up, and the beam at its longest element is 26 feet or whatever. And she's like, I think our house is 26 feet. I'm like, well, we'll put it in the center then. It won't go over the neighbor's yard.
Well,
she was thrilled.
So links in the show notes to all of the Linux apps that Noah talked about, the book, of course, and the questions. All of that is in there. Noah, is there anything else you want to touch on this setup? I mean, you talked about open source a little bit, but I think you talked about it more in the pre-show. Did you want to touch on that all? Why you kind of consider Ham a little bit of like original open source?
Yeah, so essentially it's this idea that when I buy something, when I purchase something, I feel like I own that item. I should be able to do what I want with it. And so the concept to me of owning a phone that I don't have administrative access to is ridiculous.
Right.
And the idea that I would buy a computer that I can't open it up and put a new video card in or a new wireless card, that everything would be soldered into this unibody like gold thing, is that to me seems ridiculous. And by the same token, when I, and right now we think about those things and we look at those things. We look at, like that laptop that was the laptop that you kind of hacked together with it had the wood frame and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Can't think of the name off the top of my head, but
laptop,
it's the same kind of It's the same kind of idea. You could pick the parts out you wanted, you could swap those out, and you can play with it. And that's how you played with technology.
Yeah.
80 years ago or 90 years ago, when there was no computers, then you would essentially build these communication devices. But the reality is, the nice thing about the hobby is it has evolved to include current things. So, for example, Echolink. We can have right now we're having pathetic luck because I've literally taken a wire and strung it across the studio to try and receive, and it's not the correct way to do it. No. But if I wanted to get a reliable communication, I could use something like Echolink, and we could connect it and send information via IP.
Yeah.
And I'd be able to do it. So it's a hobby that stays current, but the core values, the core belief is that you get to do everything yourself. Yeah. You get to play with everything, and nobody in the community, simply by the regulations, they force companies to allow you to build devices that allow you to hack them.
I've always noticed when we've gone to fests and stuff, it seems to be that ham radio always has a pretty strong presence. There's always a booth talking about ham radio, often talking about software-defined radio in conjunction with Linux and ham radio. Right. So there's a big crossover there. So, and that insight kind of makes it clear.
Yeah, the two communities, it tends to, one community draws the other. Now, typically, I see a lot more hams coming to Linux than Linux coming to hams for obvious reasons, and that's because somebody like you, I would imagine, looks at this and goes, isn't that cute that he has his little dials, and he turns it on, and he can spin, and sometimes he can talk to somebody, and sometimes he can. And the reality is, though, if I was using a proper setup, or what I was actually using was, a lot of times Sarah and I have a radio, and obviously in my car, and then there's one at the house, and we use it to coordinate groceries and shopping and stuff like that. And to you, you would probably say, well, I just send a text message, or I would just send a telegram or something like that. And to me, that's one less service I have to rely on. It just, if it's in my car and I have power, it's going to work.
It always works. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I don't have to rely on anyone else. And there was a fascinating presentation, and I was super disappointed that the guy kind of botched it because I started to almost fall asleep because of the way that he was presenting it. But there is apparently an organization that is building a ham radio internet. So you take ham radio, you tune it to a specific frequency, and then that becomes essentially a modem. And there is a network of people that are doing this, and so you can send and receive data over ham radio. And so it's this idea that it's kind of like a backup if anything like SOPA were to ever come to reality, were ever come to interpretation, then we'd have something to go back on, and it's going to be a little limited. We're going to be back to IRC
GPRS
style things. Yeah. Right. But it's there.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty neat. Well, Noah, thanks for the introduction, and now I know where to get my toes wet and dabble a little more. Go check out the resources Noah's provided in the show notes. And if you're listening to the audio version of this show, might not be a bad idea to go download the video to see all the cool hardware that Noah showed off in that segment. But Noah, that is our introduction to hams on Linux. And that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. But Noah, before we get the heck out of here, we have some emails to cover to read. And our first one here comes from Glenn. He says, "Good day, Noah." And I'm sure he meant Chris. I guess people have caught on that you're reading the email now. He says, "I was wondering if you knew of any USB video capture cards that support Linux." But did you not just... Okay. "I currently have a laptop, so USB would be preferable, and would like to convert old VHS and Hi8 videotapes into digital media. Also, any software you could suggest would be great, too." I've asked Chris this question some time ago, and he wasn't aware of any. If in my family we're totally Linux for computing, Ubuntu 14.04, I may not have the same knowledge as you guys do and a passion for Linux, but I would love any suggestions. Thanks in advance. Regards, Glenn. So, Noah, we did cover a device just last week.
We did. We talked about the Magwell HDMI capture device, but as I wrote back to Glenn and explained to him, and what I wanted to reiterate for everyone else is, if you're moving VHS and or Hi8 or anything like that, the Magwell is not going to be what you want to buy, because the Magwell is going to be HDMI input, and I have yet to see a VHS player that has HDMI output. Right. So what I would recommend, what I use is a device from, and we'll have it in the show notes, but it's a device from Hoppage.
Hauppauge.
Yeah, right. And essentially, it's a $35 device, and it does composite capture. Again, totally natively compatible with Linux. You plug it in, shows up as a V4L device. But that's what I use if and when I have to pull in video from antiquated sources.
Is it the Hauppauge 610? This one? Do you know?
That is it. Yep.
Okay.
That is the one.
There we go. I'll put it in the show notes.
So, it's only $40, I think, and again, totally natively compatible with Linux. Does everything the Magwell would do, except it does composite instead of HDMI, and thus it's substantially less expensive.
Yeah, and it's going to be what you need for a VCR.
Right. Yeah. In fact, you'd have more problems trying to use the Magwell with older stuff than you would with that. So that would be what I would recommend.
All right, I will drop that in the feedback section of the show notes, so that way Glenn can grab that. Do you want to grab this next one about transparency and Firefox?
Sure. Yeah. This comes into us from, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Brandimar?
Good guess.
Noah, in this... No, in the Cinnamon desktop environment, you can actually have Firefox or any other window transparent with a simple scroll of a mouse wheel. My screenshot is this, which he sent email to me. My screenshot of the Cinnamon settings is Croatian, but I'm sure you'll find your way. The scrolling adjusts level of transparency, and you can set the minimum level in the settings. And so essentially, if I was willing to switch to Cinnamon desktop, which I am not, but if I was willing to switch to Cinnamon desktop, I could have the ability to have I was saying the other week that I really wish I could have VLC playing a big video and then have Firefox over it so I can do work in the browser. And I do that with the terminal all the time, but I have no way of doing that with a web browser, and I thought that would be super
Cinnamon
neat.
And Kwin, I think, can do it too. All right, I'm going to try this next one. Thyru writes in, says you've probably come across this, but I thought I'd pass it along just in case. It's an open source competitor to Siri, Google Now, etc., and it's built on top of Linux. By the way, I'm a big fan of the show and Linux Unplugged. Sometimes I think I keep using Linux because of the excitement and passion you and the listeners have with it. Keep up the good work. So it's an open source digital assistant, and he links us to the page here. I'm going to pull it up. Noah, have you looked at this at all?
I have, yeah. I took a look at it. It's one of those things where I think it's nice that Google Now is doing some of these things, and certainly I have had this option, for a couple of years now with Google Glass, because it was kind of doing the same thing. But this is an open source project, so naturally it blows everything else out of the water.
I guess I'll play a little bit of their video, see what they have here.
Created here at the University.
See what they tell us.
Is something we call Sirius. Essentially, what is a replica of Siri, as well as Microsoft Cortana and Google's Google Now, what we call intelligent personal assistants. In a lot of ways, what we've created here with Sirius is like what Linux is to Windows, right? So with Windows, when you have a computer and you have Windows on it, we traditionally don't have access, and we currently don't have access to change Windows into being whatever we want it to be. With Linux, you have your own open source operating system that you can customize to be whatever you want. And so what we tried to do with Sirius is to provide an open source common infrastructure that anyone can customize and deploy and have freedom to do whatever they'd like, but have a starting point that is as intelligent as what you would find in these proprietary environments.
Could you imagine like a JB1 digital assistant? That would be really cool.
Right.
They have a little demo. I'll play a couple more seconds. They have a little demo of it here.
One thing that we've done with this is we've created an intelligent personal assistant that you can ask questions to, things that you would expect Wikipedia to know.
When was this built?
Another use case could potentially be a startup who would like to provide new types of services that look like an intelligent personal assistant.
There are several
This is interesting, Noah. I'm going to look more into this. This is
components for the system.
speech recognition, image recognition, and text recognition. This is really neat. And you can see if it's really truly open source, maybe integrated into the Linux desktop sometime. As long as it's not gimmicky, it'd be really cool. And I don't think, it's not, they're not developing it to be gimmicky. It's not a marketing thing. It's to be actually functional. Hey, it just struck me, Noah. It just struck me like out of nowhere. I was like, God, I feel like I don't have enough Noah. I need more Noah. So you know where I went? I went to altaspeed.com and I was just checking out Noah's day job and see what kind of stuff they do in the Grand Forks area.
Yeah, we provide commercial IT services, and we're rapidly expanding and trying to look at getting into some other ventures like remote support. So if that's something that interests you, head over to altaspeed.com. Also, while during the week, another thing another service that Jupiter Broadcasting provides that may not be well known is in the Mumble Room. Turns out that's a pretty good place if you need some help getting Linux installed. This last week we had Lael from the Mumble Room that wanted to get rid of his system of Windows, and so there was like 4 or 5 of us that we created this separate room, and we all got into the room, and then we were taking turns team viewing into his computer to try and get his NVIDIA card installed and get the video to go out to his TV, because that's what he was using for his monitor, but it had to do sound as well. And then and it was great because he dove in feet first. Like he's like, all right, well, now that Linux is running, I need to get all my stuff off of Windows. And so I thought we were just gonna, get his NTFS drive to work on Linux. No, we formatted, redid with ext4 and moved all of his data. Like he's like whole hog Linux now. So, and that all happened in the Mumble Room at 9 at night and on Wednesday or Thursday.
No, that Mumble Room is awesome. Not only is it good for that kind of stuff, but of course we have an open Mumble Room for Linux Unplugged, and the Tech Talk Today show, Tuesday through Fridays, has the open Mumble Room so people can comment on the stories. We just check your mic, make sure you have decent audio, and then it's an open room, and it's full of open source and Linux enthusiasts and BSD guys and all kinds of stuff. Also, join us live, jblive.tv Sundays, 10 a.m. Pacific. You can go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar to get that converted to your local time. We start at 10. Well, actually, we usually start earlier than that, and we just go for hours and hours. We have in-between stuff we do, and then the Faux Show follows us up, too. So it's a great Sunday to just sit down and turn the stream on and enjoy. And it makes the show even better because you help us title it, give us suggestions as we go live, all that kind of stuff. And last but not least, I got to plug the subreddit. I really would love you to go over there and get involved. If you've backed off a little bit recently, please get back over there, submit stories, make sure we have the best news in the show possible, the best app picks, the best community stuff, the best discussion. linuxactionshow.reddit.com. There's over 7,000 of you subscribed there, but I'm noticing a decline in votes and content submissions, so I'd really love it if those of you who have been a key part of that can double down on that and make the show even better. It's a huge part of what we do, and it feeds not just this show, but Linux Unplugged and sometimes Tech Talk Today as well. Okay, Noah, anything else we need to cover before we get the heck out of here?
No, unless the Reddit isn't doing it for you, you didn't have access to it for some reason, you could always head over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click on the contact link,
boom,
and send us submissions or send us your feedback. We'd love to hear it. I'd love to read it.
Or email us directly, linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com. All right, everybody, thanks so much for tuning this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. We'll see you right back here next week. So at Stefan Scoot emailed me or something that's how he says, hey, Chris, on high DPI for your XPS 13, you should try out the latest Opera. It works with most Chrome plugins and supports high DPI. And he included a screenshot of his setup here. And this is his high DPI desktop. It's funny because he's using Unity. And that's his Opera browser. So I have the XPS 13, as some of you know, at home. And it is a high DPI, super nice display. And one of the problems is neither Firefox or Chrome support high DPI, really. You can do tricks like there's extensions in Firefox to get it to double the UI size, but text doesn't quite fit right. It doesn't look good. And Chrome, you can 200% the UI of the web page itself, but the actual Chrome bar, like the URL bar and stuff, is super small and tiny. And there are double pixel modes for that as well. Again, it looks really crappy, and the irony is, of course, you get a high DPI display because you want your desktop to look as gorgeous as possible. That's why you have a high... So then you end up with all these hacks that make it just look awful. In fact, it looks so bad sometimes I've thought about just trying to run my display at a lower resolution and just say, forget it. Because I use the web browser so much, that it felt like, what am I doing? Why am I? And then plus the machine's working hard to zoom everything all the time. So when Stefan here mentioned that Opera is using high DPI out of the box on Linux, well, I sat there and said, well, didn't I remember that Opera switched over to essentially a Chromium base, and it's essentially Chromium with Opera's goodies? That might be worth taking a look at it. So I went over to the Arch user repository, and I installed opera-dev, which is a little bit more of a rolling version, a cutting-edge version of the Opera browser, but it had the most votes in the Arch user repository, and I figured I wanted the latest stuff, so might as well give it a go. So I installed opera-dev from the Arch user repository, launched it, immediately noticed that it looked perfect on my high DPI display. I was really pleased with that. It looks gorgeous, and I don't know if because it's high DPI aware or what, but it feels half as heavy as Chrome does. It's just so I often will show people, like, you want to see what's horrible about high DPI on Chrome, go load Google+. And when Google Plus loads, the fans in my laptop turn on. Like, it's pathetic, right? And I can see up in my menu bar, I can see the CPU kicking up. It's just like, man, this is just a web page. I load that same thing up in Opera. It loads instantly, effortlessly. And it's just the same core back end, but I think it's something about the way they're doing it. Maybe it's because it's more high DPI aware instead of having to zoom up the web page and zoom up all the Flash elements and zoom up everybody's stupid cat GIFs on Google Plus. Because it's not doing that level of zooming. Instead, it's just rendering them. Maybe I don't know. I don't know why. All I know is Opera performs incredible and looks good doing it. But here's the best part. Because the thing that keeps me on Chrome are things like my extensions. Like, for example, I can go here to a page, and I can take some text from a page, and I can highlight it, and I can right-click, and I can get a quote and a link formatted in Markdown for me that I can just drop right into the show notes. Now you're like, oh, okay, that's kind of handy. Yeah, I do that like 200 times a day. Seriously, that's like one of the number one things I do, because I'm constantly noting. I was doing this at 6 a.m. this morning for Unfilter. Like, it's the morning before Linux Action Show, and I'm reading a story. I'm like, oh, I got to document this. And so I'm grabbing this information all the time at all crazy-ass hours. And so this is a super time saver. Well, that is not available for Firefox. And it's called the template extension. And then you can just modify what you want it to do based on their template system. Well, guess what? All my favorite plugins for Chrome, all my favorite extensions, they install in Opera. I got one extension for Opera that allows me to download plugins from the Chrome Web Store. Now I install that, and I got my favorite extension. So I got Template, I got Diago Bookmarker, whatever it is, Diageo, whatever it is. I got LastPass, which I didn't really need, but I got my Markdown stuff. LastPass has a native plugin. And now, so I've got high DPI. I'm using essentially Chrome. I've got better performance, and I've got my favorite Chrome plugins in Opera. And I also have the benefit of being a little bit removed from the Googs. Like, the Googs is definitely a huge part of Opera, but I know that, like, my bros and sisters over at Opera are, like, sifting through that S and being like, well, we don't want that in our product, because we're proud. Because they're proud of their web browser, so they don't want Google, like, sticking something in there that's nefarious. So, the folks over at Opera are going to pull that stuff out. So, I assume, right? Because it's Google's business to track me, and it's Opera's business to make a kick-ass browser and get me to use their browser, and it's always in their best interest to make that the most appealing to me as possible. Whereas, always kind of be in the Goog's best interest to kind of know what I'm up to. And so I like that maybe, potentially, Opera kind of puts a buffer between me and that Goog's instinct. So, yeah, I don't know. You should go check it out if you haven't. Opera on Linux is actually pretty nice. I don't know who you can trust more. I don't know if that's even relevant, really. Because if you really care about that, you should probably just be using Epiphany or Web, which is also, by the way, high DPI. So